Today, the most important thing to watch for Tesla investors is the progress of Tesla's Robotaxi. But while you think you already know the facts, that Tesla is operating a Robotaxi in Austin with a safety rider, and they're operating a ride-hail service in the Bay Area of California, there are many other signals you probably aren't yet aware of that we will cover today. There are 18 cities that Tesla's already making moves, plus job openings show even more than we realize. You might think Waymo is now available in 10 cities and is way ahead, but think again. Let's review the deployments and road validation cities by population. At the last earnings call, Elon said we'd reach half the US population by end of year. Is this still on track? The person we're going to talk to today is Cern Basher. He's a chartered financial analyst running his own investment advisory firm called BrilliantAdvice. He provides wealth management services. Welcome, Cern.
Hi, Herbert. Yeah, I think there's a few interesting things hiding amongst the data points.
Yeah. First of all, thank you, Cern. Honestly, you spent 6 hours putting together this deck and research. That work is something that I think the audience really, really does appreciate. You put in the time, and we do appreciate you. So let's go through this data points because, again, when you first look at Robotaxi, you think, Tesla's only in 2 cities. They don't even have the safety rider removed yet. They're only doing ride hail. They're so far behind. But go down the details, and maybe we'll see some nuggets, right? Thanks. Let's go.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things, Herbert, where if you just look at certain data points, you're maybe missing the bigger picture. So let's make an attempt, I think, at looking at a bit of the bigger picture here. The first thing I think that's interesting to look at is Tesla's hiring and what they're hiring for. And so right now, when you do a search for vehicle operator, autopilot, you get 13 different results. And this page here shows the first one in Oakland, California. But Tesla has been hiring for this role for some time. And if you go to the next slide, Herbert, you can see the 13 there on the leftmost in the middle column. So a number of roles in California, the first 5 cities there, and then the last one in Austin, Texas on the left side there, and then San Francisco, and then another one in Texas. Farmers Branch, I believe, is near Dallas, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. And then we have a few in Florida, Tampa, Clearmont, which is the Orlando area, Miami, Palo Alto, and then Chicago. We've also seen job openings previously, not among the 13 that are currently outstanding in Flushing, New York, in Tempe, Arizona, Phoenix, Tempe area, and Houston, Texas. And also I found in 2023, they did some hiring for some seasonal vehicle operators in a bunch of other places, including Minnesota, the Twin Cities area, in Utah and the Salt Lake City area, Denver, Colorado. So a number of places, Seattle, Washington, and so on. So Tesla's been, preparing for this for some time, and they may already have a lot of these cities. They may be further along in some of these other cities than we realize.
I don't know what I mean. These ones here, if it was 2023, I would go ahead and assume that this is full self-driving, just testing FSD.
Could be, yeah, but some of that data may be relevant to what they're doing now. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll have to see. Either way, they've been hiring these vehicle operators in multiple cities. I think you grabbed the description of this job description.
Yeah. This is coming from Nick Cruz-Patain, and he said, this is what the job role of autopilot vehicle operator is. As a prototype vehicle operator, that's what it says. You will be responsible for driving an engineering vehicle for extended periods, conducting dynamic audio and camera data collection for testing and training purposes. So just want to clear up that those lists of job openings, I don't think it sounds like they're not safety riders, safety drivers, ride-hail drivers. That's not what they are. This is, those cars that they will, just before they launch in a new city, they send out these Teslas that are modified to include LiDAR at the top, and then they test the LiDAR measurement as a ground truth, and then they compare that to the vision cameras in the cars. And once they feel like they're exactly perfectly right, then you don't need LiDAR. You just go ahead and move this. They're just being extra safe in these cities. That's what I think this is, prototype vehicle operator. What do you think? Is that what it sounds like to you?
Yeah, I think it's a number of things. I think it initially maybe Model Y and so on, and we certainly see some of these vehicles on the Cybertruck as well that are equipped with various sensors. But it also may be Cybercab at some point soon.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a role that Tesla will need for some time. And the job description is quite detailed. It says, among other things, it says drive an engineering vehicle for extended hours in designated area for data collection, 5 to 8 hours a day. Start, stop recording devices and perform minor equipment/software debugging as needed. Analyze and report on the quality of data collected during each shift. Provide feedback and suggest process improvements to optimize data collection. Write detailed daily drive reports documenting observations and issues, and ensure the vehicle safety and operational status before every shift. So yeah, again, this is just a further sign that they're preparing, obviously, for a robotaxi service in lots of different places.
Perfect. Okay, thank you for doing that. And then, I've been showing this chart quite often the last several days. Jonathan Stokes put it together, and I do think that it shares a lot of information that you don't just get. Okay, so right now, when you ask most Tesla investors, they'll tell you, yeah, I understand Robotaxi. Tesla has it active in Austin. You can see here. And in fact, they've expanded the geofence several times. You can see there, but there's still a safety rider. So it's still stuck there. That's what they'll tell you. Okay. There's the Austin one. And then they'll say, yes, I know that they're in San Francisco and San Jose and they're ride hill. Okay. That's it. That's what they get. But when you look a little closer, thank you for putting this together, there is already significant effort by Tesla in Arizona where you can get the permit applied, permit received. There was a job posting for a safety driver. There's been LiDAR tests. Once you see the LiDAR test, that tells you that it's very likely that that's what's going to launch very soon. You got Phoenix and Tempe. You've got San Antonio down here. And in fact, this is an old table because he updated this just a few days ago where there's actually LiDAR tests found in Dallas also. That he added that now. So that's the next thing you look at. And then you see, look, all these other cities where there's actually already permits approved. Even like, I didn't realize this, but take a look at this. I mean, this is a safety driver ads are being done here, So this is very important. You can see that Nevada, of course, and Arizona, they already announced that we know that they have those permits. But this is a very good complete chart.
Yeah, I would just add a couple of things. The safety driver ad, again, may be getting confused with the vehicle operator information that we just looked at.
Yep.
So it's not totally clear about whether they're actually ads just for safety drivers that this table's referring to.
Good point.
And also LiDAR tests, maybe a better term for that would be road validation. Mm-hmm. Tesla's not using LiDAR, but they're using LiDAR to, as you said, to create the ground truth. So road validation is probably a better term for that. But this is a great table. And I like the fact that we've got some dates and some timelines here. And you can see in different states, the process is a little bit different. We don't know, for example, when or if a permit's been applied in New York, but yet it looks like they're hiring people there. And same thing in Florida. So it's showing progress, and over time, all these steps need to be accomplished. But we want to see, kind of where Tesla's positioning itself. And at the point that they, launch the service and expand the geofenced area and eventually take out the safety drivers, how large of an operation could this be?
Yep, agreed. Okay.
So what I did, Herbert, was sort of inspired by this table, take a look at all these different cities and locations. And I took a look at the population of these areas. Now, somebody that lives in New York will notice that the population I've got for New York here is 8.5 million. The whole New York area actually is more like, 20, 21 million people. But I purposely excluded New Jersey. I purposely just kind of kept it small. I wanted to be conservative here. I didn't want to overstate the numbers too much or at all. But this is a comparison here between Tesla and Waymo. And it's a combination of where they're already deployed, right? In Tesla's case, it's in 2 locations, in Austin and in the Silicon Valley area. But also what I'm calling the road validation cities, the cities where we have some evidence that the companies are positioning themselves to begin to validate their service. Okay. And so if you look at this table, it's a little hard to see who's ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you can see that, Tesla, in San Diego, but Waymo's not. Waymo's in Boston and Detroit and, Philadelphia and Atlanta, and Tesla's not.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I'm sorry, it shows Tesla here in Atlanta, but there's a few cities where, one or the other is in it and the other company's not yet. So if you go to the next page, we can look at this in a table format. So the population of the United States are at the bottom, about 340 million people. In all these cities collectively, there's about 120 million people in these areas. On the right side, we've got Tesla, and the cities where they've either deployed or the road validation is taking place or is going to take place relatively soon, that represents a total population of about 102 million, which is about 30% of the US total population. So already you can see that Tesla has made great strides in at least preparing itself to be operational in about 30% of the total US population in those markets. And the interesting thing is Waymo is pretty similar at about 26%. Okay, so from this, simple way of looking at it, it's a two-horse race. Of course, we know that it's way more nuanced than this. It's going to highly depend on how quickly each company can scale. It's going to depend on the cost structure, regulatory approvals. There's all kinds of other factors we want to consider. But nonetheless, I think this is kind of an interesting way to look at it.
I do. I like it a lot. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of caveats here. A lot of caveats. If you're looking at just operation, like live operation, clearly Waymo is ahead. But if you're looking at it based on what you call road validation, where you know that the company has said, okay, this is where we're going to launch next. Let's get started with testing it. And so you do have, like, for example, you include Seattle, Washington here, 4 million people, and you include Waymo in it. But do you know that they've been validating Seattle for 10 years? 10 years. I was talking to Brian White about it, and we've been seeing these validation vehicles all over for 10 years. And so, they plan to get here. I don't think they've announced it yet here, but they certainly did announce New York, but they're not live there yet. And so in a way, I like the way you compare this, because even though they just kind of testing it, we've seen how fast Tesla can go once they validate road validation to actual launch. It's more about operations at this point. But both of them, by the way, I think is limited by operations. Can you actually buy enough cars in the case of Waymo, operate them, right, to actually have enough LiDARs? And in case of Waymo, they only have 2,000 cars, and they'll have another maybe 1,500 by the end of this year. And so they have 3,000. They have to pick and choose. But then who charges them? Who cleans them? Who, the app and markets it and all that. So that's what's slowing them down significantly. But Tesla, once they've done the road validation, it's a lot easier for them to launch because they already have service centers. They already have superchargers. They've got, of course, the platform works much easier. So I like the way you put this together. It's a bit of a stretch because in a way you said road validation, but it's not. If we had seen already the LiDAR cars for Tesla in those cities, I think that's much more clear that that's going to happen. In this case, it feels like you've included not just that, but also just job openings, right?
Well, again, I'm using job openings as an indicator of that road validation will be happening in short order. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to look out a little bit, hopefully not too far, but if they're hiring for positions, presumably as soon as those people are hired, they're going to be put to work, right? So again, I think it's indicative of kind of the next step in the cities that Tesla plans to do the road validation work in.
Yes for Tesla, no for Waymo, because again, just back to my point about Seattle, they've had people they hired 10 years ago. So
yeah, there's significant differences between the two companies and the methods and the ability to scale and all that. And so kind of leaving that aside for today, although we're going to touch on a couple of things towards the end relating to all that.
Okay.
But just wanted to kind of get, apples to apples as best we can. How are these companies positioning themselves and what markets are they positioning themselves? What kind of population are we looking at, and what percentage of the total U.S. population is that? Mm-hmm. Right. Whether or not they can serve all that remains to be seen. It's a whole other question.
Highly doubtful. So first of all, this is a great. Just the population count alone tells you that it's about 30% of the U.S. population for Tesla. To hit Elon's goal of 50%, it's like, first of all, they have to take all of these and turn them on and actually be fully serviceable, which I don't think is going to happen in 2 months. So that is just not going to happen.
All these and more, and I'll show you a table here in a second on that.
All this and more.
Yeah.
All right.
So on the next page, just a couple of important points. Phil mentions that the requirement to scale to road for Tesla is dramatically lower, right? So Waymo's validation is a mapping process, and Tesla's is really a simple validation step it can't do without. So that's the source of your 10 years in Seattle.
Yes.
Seattle probably has some very complicated roads.
Yes.
right? And they have to map those out. And of course, things are
Like
changing all
in
the time.
like precise detail. And if it changes, they need to redo it again. Yeah.
Yep. Right. And so he says, in other words, Waymo must run every road it chooses to service. Tesla does not. Right. So that's a significant difference and an important point.
Mm-hmm.
And then Johnny Dangerously, says that my guess is the geofenced areas in each city will dramatically favor Tesla, as Waymo's geofenced areas are typically much smaller. Secondly, Waymo's goal of 3,500 vehicles by the end of 2026 will pale in comparison to Tesla's fleet. Right? We don't know yet, but that certainly seems right. Elon has talked about turning on the fleet, activating the fleet.
Mm-hmm.
So he says the actual paid miles will be staggeringly in Tesla's favor soon. It's
Mm-hmm.
called scale. Waymo will look like a few small coffee shops next to Tesla, looking like Starbucks.
Okay, well, let me break down each sentence. I liked what he said, but clearly, so first of all, I don't understand his first sentence. Geofence areas in each city will dramatically favor Tesla, as Waymos are typically much smaller. What does that mean?
Basically, it's relating to Phil's point that Waymo has to map everything, and so their ability to expand their geofenced areas is going to be much more challenging than it is for Tesla, because Tesla doesn't have to map everything, right? So Tesla can expand its geofenced areas in cities much more quickly.
Quicker.
Yep.
So I think what that means then is that, okay, both Tesla and Waymo are in Austin, but Austin's geofence areas is, because they've been there longer, it was like the certain size. Tesla comes in a few months later, boom, we're about the same size as you. And then 2 weeks later, boom, we're bigger. And then, for every city that we're both in, Tesla's going to have a bigger geofence area. I think that's what he's saying there. Then he said, secondly, Waymo's goal of 3,500 by end of 2026, which is next year, which is like 1 year from now. And that's what they announced, right? Because Waymo says we already have 2,000 cars. That's already out there. But we have 1,500 that we bought from Jaguar I-Pace, because Jaguar discontinued that car. And so they bought the rest of their remaining fleet. And those 1,600 are sitting in a warehouse. And then they have to partner with Magna. Magna comes in, and over the course of next year, they're going to install all this stuff. And so by the end of the year, they'll have another 1,600 or 2,000 cars, I think it is, to add to. So he put 3,500, which means 1,500 cars extra. And by end of 2026, how many cars do you think Tesla will have on the fleet? What's your guess?
Yeah, we'll discuss what my model has in a second, but it's
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, 10 times more.
Well, let's keep the Waymo number in mind, and we'll take a look.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, brother. So the actual paid miles will be staggeringly in Tesla's favor soon, right? It's called scale. Okay.
Yep. Okay. And then we get to Elon's comment on the last quarterly earnings conference call, and this is the quote. This is the full quote. Right, he's talking about getting regulatory permission to launch in the Bay Area, Nevada, Arizona, and Florida, and a number of other places. Right, so as we get the
if
approvals,
we pause there, we already got obviously the Bay Area that happened.
Yep.
We already got Nevada and Arizona just the last 2 weeks. Both of them were discovered. We actually have Tesla already has the permits, and so Florida is probably next. Because thank you for pulling that out. That's good.
Yeah, and Florida, by the way, already has very favorable autonomous legislation. So I'm not exactly sure on what's required to get approval per se, but it wouldn't be very onerous to do that, and based on my understanding of the Florida law.
Okay.
So as we get the approvals and we improve our safety, then we will be launching the autonomous ride hailing in most of the country.
Okay.
And then he goes on. He says, and I think we'll probably have autonomous ride hailing, spelling mistake there, in probably half of the population of the U.S. by the end of the year. Now, as we said a minute ago, I think that could be a challenging goal, right? But he says that's at least our goal, subject to regulatory approvals.
But let me pause for a second there, because what we've been researching so far is the launch of, validation of this so that the FSC truly works. But if you're doing ride hail services, you don't need to do this to the T. Because it's like ride hail. We're doing it now. I mean, how many people are in LA today, or whatever city you want to talk about, owns Teslas that are using FSD now? They got the data. They already know. And so then you hire a bunch of ride hail people. So these are just people off the street. Says you're now an Uber driver, but you're a Tesla driver, and you're sitting in the car in front of the steering wheel. And that's he's going to launch, right? So that's the plan now, is to go to as many cities as possible, launch it as ride hail first. And then as they get the approvals, and then they remove the ride hail guy and then put a safety rider and then onward, right? Do you know what I mean? Like if it's just a ride hail, They could do that.
Yes, but if you look at the line above, autonomous ride hailing, right? So he's very clear about what he's talking about, right?
It's
not
still
just
autonomous.
Yeah, still autonomous.
Well, I mean, you and I are doing autonomous ride hailing today. It's just that my friends don't pay me.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
All right.
Right. And then the next paragraph is kind of more of the same thing. He says it's probably addressing half of the population of the US by the end of the year, but we are very, very cautious. We don't want to take any chances. So we're going to, yes, go cautiously. Right. And then I want you just to read this last sentence, but the service areas and the number of vehicles in operation will increase at a hyper exponential rate. So just put that terminology in the back of your mind for a second. We're going to come back to that. That before we do, let's explore this half of the US population. What would it take and how many other cities would they need to add to go from that 30% we saw in the previous table to get to 50?
I just want to interject quickly before we jump off the slide. First of all, thank you for putting this together. I think this is gold, and I wish I had pulled this out myself just to really, understand what he was saying and how many of us interpreted it. So, he said that it's probably addressing half of the population. Addressing is the word he used. So I don't know if it's servicing half the population, which is, I think most people assume, okay, if you're saying that you got a ride hail service, you got to be able to service it. You have to have at least 2,000 cars per whatever city. I think it's just addressing it. I think for his mind, it could just be, we have a presence and we're just doing it slowly with a small number of cars.
That's how I take it. Yep.
So if that's the case, it's still a huge milestone because they had to get approval, get there, and then start it. But it doesn't have to be okay, I got 5,000 cars for each. Then you said this, which is great, hyper exponential. I don't remember that word. That is fantastic.
So we're going to explore that. This is actually very interesting. But before we do, let's address the half of the population first. Okay. So here's a table I put together. And I asked a little bit of help from Grok. I asked, in order to get Tesla to 50% of the population, please consider the states that have autonomous friendly legislation, and then basically show me a table of how we could get there. So the numbers or the lines that are green are additions. They weren't on the previous table. So Sacramento, California, for example, is an addition, 2.7 million people. Okay. Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota, Charlotte, North Carolina. Okay, the Cleveland, Akron, Canton area in Ohio, the Portland, Vancouver, Salem area in Oregon, and the Salt Lake, Provo area in Utah. Okay, so those are additions. So that's 6 different metro areas that we have to add besides the ones that we're already aware of. There's also some areas where I've increased the population numbers here to include kind of the greater metro area. So all the numbers that are kind of in pink or purple there, those numbers were increased to reflect the true size of the metro area. Before I was being very conservative. Now I'm just trying to reflect the true size of the entire metro area. So for example, the New York one went from 8 some million to 20. So obviously that includes New Jersey and other areas, Long Island and stuff like that, right? So I just want to be clear that if some of these numbers have increased from the previous table, but if they were in all these areas, then that would be about 50% of the US population that they could be addressing. Now, the question is how many vehicles, and we don't know that yet, but at least if they had a presence in all these markets, they would be able to provide service to what would be the equivalent of 50% of the US population.
Now, you said, though, that this you asked it if it can find the cities and states that is, what was your words, that were favorable?
Autonomous friendly legislation, regulations.
Okay. How is Washington State in there?
Well, again, it was ranked. I'm not sure where it fell on the list.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where did you get that Tesla was going to go here in Seattle, Washington?
Again, this through the research I did, I believe that they are preparing themselves for that market.
That they had a job opening something? Because I hadn't, that must have missed me because I've not seen any movement here at all.
Yeah.
The reason I bring this up is that I think, some cities here, you think, oh my God, you can understand clearly Arizona, California, Florida, right? Sunny, clean, easy to drive. Seattle's when it snows and it rains and it's got all these, harder streets that go up and down. But you can also just not offer services. And that's what they did in Austin when it was a big typhoon. Both Waymo and Tesla just stopped robotaxi services for that period of time.
Yep.
And then as Tesla got better in that Austin area with Robotaxi, and then it's kept raining, they actually were first. They were back out again. Like they figured that, okay, actually we got this now. Like, so rain itself won't stop, but if there's like a massive snowstorm, yeah, they'll just not offer it. I don't know why people always get worried about that. You just don't offer it. As simple as that. Just like Uber, you can't get many Ubers when it snows. So.
Yeah, there's lots of different things like that, right? Like, for example, in the Cleveland area, they get potentially a lot of snow or some big snowstorms, the lake effect snow and so on. So it would probably be far easier to operate in the likes of Columbus or Cincinnati. So again, these are just some estimates in terms of what it might take. In reality, it may take more cities than this.
Mm-hmm. How many states is this? 20 states.
Yeah. And it may be maybe much easier just to expand throughout all of Texas. Mm-hmm. And expand to other cities in California. So there's different pathways. I'm not suggesting this is the only one.
And he did say U.S. population, did he? Half of the population. He didn't say half of the states or half of the cities. He said half of the population. Yep. And that's why you did it this way. Okay.
So the easiest way to get there would just be to have some presence in the biggest metro areas, right? You have to include New York. You have to include LA. You have to include, some of those big cities. That would be the easiest way to get there. There would be other pathways that would be more difficult. So we'll see. The reality may look very different than this, but this is just an indication of what it might take to get to 50%.
Could you do an analysis where instead of saying, oh, okay, we're going to add Seattle, Washington, which is 5 million, instead of doing that, I'm just going to do all of California and all of Florida and all of Texas, the entire state. Because that's more likely to me than, a new city, a new place, right? Because once they got Austin, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Sacramento, San Antonio, might as well just do it the rest of the state because it's much easier. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, we can take a look at that and see how significantly different it is. But yeah, there's lots of ways to get to 50%. This is a bit like election night, counting states, right? Do we have the votes from Florida? Do we have the votes from all the different states, Wisconsin?
So it's not going to happen in 2 months, dude.
No, I agree. I think that would be quite a stretch, but certainly they're making some nice progress towards that goal. And even if it's 6 months from now, that would be great.
Okay. Are you going to explain hyper exponential? Because hyper exponential was both the, he referred to both service areas and the number of vehicles in operation. Both of those are going to be hyper exponential. So even the service areas could go hyper exponential.
That's right. No, that's a good catch. All right. So let's first of all cover exponential if you go to the next page. Exponential growth. This is looking at 20 quarters. So let's say we're at 20 vehicles now. That if you have an exponential growth and it's doubling, then it's 40 in the next quarter, and then 80 and 160 and 320, right? It's doubling. And I had it double on a quarterly basis. Okay. You can see by 20 quarters, 5 years from now, you're at 21 million vehicles with most of the growth coming in that last year, right? Such is the nature of exponential. It looks like nothing's happening much at first. It's like, oh, we went from 20 to 40. Oh my gosh, this is slow. Really? That's all we can do? Right? And then 80. Okay, that doubled. Okay, but we're such small numbers, it's not meaningful, right? So this is exponential. And the cool thing about exponential curves is if you make them a log scale, exponential curves look like straight lines. Okay, so just keep that in mind. A log scale makes an exponential curve look like a steady straight line. And the reason is that the percentage change from 100 to 1,000 is the same as the percentage change from 1,000 to 10,000, 10,000 to 100,000. So that's why it looks like a straight line. What does hyper exponential look like? Hyper exponential looks like this.
Oh, I don't like it.
Okay, but yeah, so this is illustrative. I'll come back to what it might actually mean for Tesla. But hyper exponential actually could mean very slow in the very first part of this. And then it's increasing at an increasing rate. So if you put this on a log chart, it's not a straight line. It's a curved line up, okay? And the hyper exponential curve could mean that it grows slower than an exponential curve initially. Not necessarily, but it could mean that, okay? But then when it crosses the exponential line, it's way higher. At the end point here, instead of 22 million, it's 50 million. Just on this curve. But here is what I think actually is more likely for Tesla. a hyper exponential curve earlier on. And maybe the next page actually is easier to see when you compare it to the exponential curve.
Yep.
I've got a hyper exponential here actually for the first 6 quarters.
Mm-hmm.
So it all depends on when the hyper exponentiality kicks in and for how long it lasts. If it's going to be hyper exponential over the next 5 years, then yes, it could be that first green curve that we saw where it's slow in the beginning and then just takes off. Or it could be like this, where it's hyper exponential for just a short period of time. And you can see that gets you to a point that's way above the exponential curve. Okay. Now we don't know. Elon didn't define the shape of his hyper exponential curve, and that actually would be a cool question for somebody to ask him on a conference call. Although most people wouldn't have a clue what the questioner was asking about, but Elon would. And of course, maybe he doesn't know the exact shape of this curve, but in his mind, I'm sure he knows when it's likely to go hyper exponential, and maybe for how long it will last. So it's possible, in theory, to get to 50 million vehicles in operation in like 12 or 13, 14 quarters from now, using a hyper exponential growth rate. But the key feature of this is what is the endpoint and how long does a hyper exponentiality period last? If it's short, you can have massive growth very quickly. In this case, in the previous one, if it was 20 quarters, then the growth happens over the 20 periods, and the early ones, it's a very slow growth rate. Okay. But you can see, again, I'm graphing this on a log scale, and the fact that the hyper exponential curve is like almost straight up shows you how crazy this growth can be using a hyper exponential growth rate.
Can you, let's pause for a second. So first of all, you put quarters down below. So 20 quarters is 5 years.
5 years.
It would be nice if you had put 1 year, 2 years.
Well, it's going to grow in kind of on a quarterly basis, right? Like that's the growth is going to. That's fine.
Okay. This is 1 year. This is 2 years.
Yes.
Okay, so now you're saying that in 1 year, we could have 12,300 cars.
Yeah. But then two quarters later, Herbert, it's at 3.2 million.
3.2 million. So, but just the idea that it's going to be faster growth than Waymo. Waymo will have next year. Waymo will have 4,000 cars, but if
3,500,
3,500, it'll be 12,000.
Yeah.
The other thing too is like remember that this is autonomous ride hail, which is FSD, which is a person sitting in front of FSD, but Uber as opposed to like no person in the car. And when do you expect that? Are we still on track for Tesla to say you can put in your own car too?
Well, that remains to be seen. And that, again, I think leads into Elon's thought process about this hyper exponential growth. Yeah, because in order to truly have this, you have to be able to add vehicles to the fleet that you're not just making and building out of the factory.
There you go. When does that happen though? You don't need it until maybe here, right? On the 2 years from now, because 8 is 2 years.
Well, that's 6 months, 6 quarters from now. So it's a year and a half.
6 quarters, year and a half. That's when which is fair because that's what he said. He said a year from now.
Yeah.
The second half of 2026. So it could be like a few more quarters. Okay. Got it. There you go. So this is nice. Good numbers. I can sit here and look at this all day long. Just I need to figure out if this is true. So that's why we have 20 cars only. And then people are going to go 6 months from now, they're going to go, we only have 80 cars, 72 cars. Big deal. But it's like boom, 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 boom. Yeah.
If it is, as Elon said, a hyper exponential curve.
Right here.
The growth can suddenly be mind-blowing in terms of the increase.
I like this a lot because this is actually what I would have said too, which is like is there a difference between like 70 cars? Okay, let's keep it 100 cars for now. But once Tesla's got it, FSD 14 truly is 3 times safer than a human. They've already mapped out and got the operations for a city. It's not like they need to jump and they can do like this, but how much? And so I do like this idea where, I think I'll probably 200-300. And then after a quarter of that, I'd probably jump to 1,005 and then boom, 10,000, right? Yeah. And then boom, 100,000 extra. I like this. I can see this happening actually.
To me, it appears as though they're following a strategy of laying the groundwork in many, many cities, right? And then after a while, once you've laid the groundwork and the operations have been tested and so on, and then you're ready to scale and you're ready basically to hit the button and say, add the vehicles to the fleet. Now, we don't know when that date will come. But Elon has talked many times about this idea of activating the fleet, and a hyper exponential curve captures that concept. Again, Please don't take this as any kind of prediction.
Yeah.
I'm just showing you what a hyper exponential curve growth looks like
Could
and
look
what it
like.
could mean for
Well,
robotaxis.
that's
These
why
are
I'm
not my
saying,
predicted numbers.
yeah, that's why I'm saying I actually do think that this is pretty close to what I would have said.
Yeah.
I can imagine happening because 1,000 cars is clearly something that's very doable for Tesla. And then the jump to 12,000, that's where I was thinking too. If it works and it's like you've got cities already mapped, and we're talking about over a year now that you've already tested Austin, let's say, or even in just Austin alone, you can see that they can do 12,000 cars, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you're rolling off, what is it, 5,000 Model Ys a week out of Giga Texas, I mean, you could get way more than that in terms of in a quarter's growth,
But
right?
the
So
idea of how many ride hails, how many cars do you need in a, let's say just Austin? Maybe just 5,000, and then you move on to the other cities. So not just Austin, but let's say Dallas and the others, you can do 12,000.
it depends on how quickly you want to drive down the cost of transportation, right? You and I talked about this whole concept of if Tesla encounters roadblocks in other states and you only have Texas, then they could follow a dominate Texas strategy, and you could flood the market with, you know, 1 million vehicles if you wanted to. And you would take over the transportation market essentially. So I don't see any limit to that. I don't see any limit. But as long as you can deploy vehicles in other markets at higher rates, then you should do that, right? So there is this trade-off between, you know, what's available to them in terms of deploying vehicles, what markets can they go into, versus their production rate of Model Ys and eventually cybercabs. But once you have a foothold in a city, you can just flood that city with as many vehicles as you want to, right? And until you've A, destroyed ride share, which is easy, B, destroyed vehicle ownership, which is going to take some time, then they've got a lot of headroom for deploying vehicles.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw this post today by, I won't name that person, but the previous Tesla bull investor who's now been bashing Elon and bashing Tesla for a year now. He said that he thinks that Tesla's robotaxi will be just like those littered bird, those scooters that nobody wants to use, and they'll be like sitting there, like they'll have more cars than demand. Of course, he's saying things without any facts, but I just want to ask you about supply and demand there. I mean, it's one thing to say, hey, if Tesla can roll it out, then you have 161,000 that it's going to be easily all taken over, like have full utilization. Or is there some idea that there won't be a demand? I don't think, personally, I have zero chance that that's going to happen. Like not zero chance, but very, very low.
Yeah. This is really simple, in my opinion. We know where the demand curves are for transportation, right? We've got a certain segment that's willing to pay Uber and Lyft, $4, $3, $2 a mile. Okay, so as long as you're offering a service that slightly undercuts that, you capture that market, right? Because that market already exists today. You have another segment of the market, perhaps subprime auto, where effectively for those people it costs them $1.50 a mile. So if you operate at $1.45 a mile, you're going to eat into that pretty quickly. And then we have another segment that's, customer or individually owned vehicles that might cost them $1 a mile. You operate at 95 cents, you're going to eat into that market. So as long as Tesla is able to keep reducing their price over time, they're going to eat all those different parts of the transportation market, right? And of course, the bigger that the network becomes, the more vehicles that there are, then the more reliable it is, and the more, you won't have to wait for a vehicle. And people are just going to make the economic decision and say, oh, I can save $5,000 a year on my transportation costs. I would be a fool not to take that opportunity up, right? Why pay $5,000 more for something than you need to? Most people don't do that, right? I mean, there's some things where there's perceived value in, owning an iPhone versus an Android or something, and people pay up for that. But in general, if you can save that kind of money, most people are going to give up their personal vehicles. And again, it'll be a long time before everybody does. There are many situations right now where having a personally owned vehicle makes sense. But we've got families that own 3 or 4 vehicles. We've got people that have a second vehicle that's hardly ever used. So there's plenty of opportunity to eat into the personally owned, transportation market.
Mm-hmm.
This notion that it's going to be like bird scooters sitting around. Mm-hmm. The problem with that was that market never existed before. We didn't have a scooter market. They tried to create one.
Yeah, there was no such a thing as a scooter market. So I just took a look at just ride hail alone, which is a small sub segment of what personal transportation, low cost that you just walked us through is going to be. But just ride hail alone, Uber. I looked it up and it says Uber has 1 million active drivers in the US in 2019. Yeah, that's the last data we've got. 1 million active drivers in the US, 209,000 in California alone. So Uber's global driver base is roughly 5.4 million in 2022, and it doubled to 8.8 million. So yeah, so here, you know what I mean? Those numbers already, we can easily get to this level here.
Yeah.
You know, okay.
There's different phases of this too, right? Like if, let's say we're focused on just Austin for a second. In the early days, a few hundred, a few thousand vehicles, you're competing against Uber and you're destroying them. But in order for the other things to happen that I talked about, it's going to be important actually to make sure you've got thousands and thousands of vehicles all over the city so that then people know that it's reliable. That when they hail a Tesla Robotaxi, it's going to be there in 5 minutes or less. So there is some tipping points, I think, at different levels of scale that really will matter here. Eating the rideshare market is easy. That's a given. It's going beyond that might prove to be a little bit more challenging until you get to a certain scale in each city.
Yeah, I'm also thinking about cybercabs. And so, these numbers we already talked about up to here, a certain amount of here can be done by just regular cars that not only do we have, but also that they will be making Model Ys, Model 2s. That's 2 million a year. So not all of them is going to go to, ride hail. But if you add in the cybercabs, I can clearly see that cybercabs, even just cybercabs alone, could replace all of this. 12,000 cybercabs by a year from now, 160,000 cybercabs by a year and a half from now. I don't know if we'll get to 3 million cybercabs, but if you add a combination of cybercabs, maybe 1 million cybercabs in about 2 years from now, yeah.
Right. Now,
that might be aggressive. That's a little bit aggressive.
Keep in mind, again, this blue line below is the exponential curve, which we're using a log scale, so it looks like a straight line. At the top end there, in 2030, that's capped at 20 million. But the green line, you can see, gets to 50. Now, let's just kind of double check this. So if we go to my model on the next page that we've previously discussed, okay, and there's no changes to this. This is what we discussed, a few weeks ago. Again, just to walk through this real quick. The highlighted column there in gray is my production or delivery estimates for Tesla from, 2025 through 2035. Just really rough round numbers, okay? So I've got them growing up to about 7.5 million and staying there, just to be conservative. And then you can see the next column is the cumulative number of EVs sold. All right, so the end of this year, about 9 million. And then by 2035, you're getting up to close to 70 million vehicles. The next column then is the Robotaxi fleet size. So you asked me earlier in this show, Herbert, what my numbers were for the end of this year. I have 100,000 by the end of next year, and then 100,000, and then 1 million in 2028. Okay. And then 3 million, and then 10 million by 2030. So in that previous hyper exponential curve, we're getting to 50 million by 2020, by 2030. But there's only 32 million cumulative Teslas sold. So the end of that curve seems kind of crazy based on this table. Okay, but the purpose of showing that previous one was more showing the hyper exponentiality in the beginning. So I just wanted to point that out because there'll be some eagle-eyed viewers that say, Cern, that doesn't make any sense. How can you have 50 million robotaxis when you've only made 32? Right? I get it. I'm just trying to show this hyper exponentiality for a period of time. I don't think we'll be in a hyper exponential growth curve for 5 years, but it could be for 6 quarters or 8 quarters. And then it really flattens out. Okay. And basically,
it's a lot of big numbers. Yeah, it's a lot of big numbers at that point. So.
Yeah. Okay. Now, if you go to the next page, this is an altered version of this, and I've got Tesla capping out at 10 million vehicles. Okay. And so I could see in that scenario an autonomous fleet size of 50 million by 2035. To me, that's entirely possible by then. Okay. So just, there is a pathway to 50 million in the next 10 years. And by the way, that would be about $1 trillion in net profit based on this model, and a market cap just on Robotaxi of a mere 52 trillion. Just to mention that as an aside.
52 times what it is worth today.
Yeah.
So numbers.
It's interesting. Of course, we've got so many unknowns right now. We don't know the shape of this hyper exponential curve, but it is worth, I think, thinking about what Elon said there. And I think most people have just kind of let that term pass. But we should expect a hyper exponential growth curve for robotaxi at some point in the next 2 or 3 years, in my opinion.
I love it. Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. I thought that was, something that many of us just did not pick up on. Both service areas and number of vehicles in operation will increase at a hyper exponential rate.
Yeah, if you can increase the number of cities at a hyper exponential rate, then that really bodes well for the number of vehicles you can deploy, right? Now, as we showed, you don't really need to increase the number of cities. Now, is a service area a city, or does a city have multiple service areas? That's probably true. If you're servicing the greater metro New York area, you probably need 20 or 25 service areas perhaps in a city of that size. So there's some nuance there, I think, in terms of what that means.
Yeah, I mean, service areas increasing at a hyper exponential rate could also just mean geofenced area. Okay, here,
Sure.
boom, the whole state.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow. Okay, this is great. It was good to go through this exercise because, again, the whole point of the show was you think you know, but you don't know. And it's good to go to the details, the actual, the definition of these job openings, the full, following which states and cities they're in, your analysis of how many people are in these states and which ones are friendly. What would you call it?
Autonomous ride-hail friendly or autonomous operation friendly.
That was a good way to analyze it. The words that Elon actually used to really understand clearly what he might have meant. I mean, we might be totally reading into it, but we know that kind of Elon is very, very precise. These people who are, the brilliant people like that, they're very precise about words. They, comes naturally to them exactly the right word to say, just to be as clear as possible for them. And then we interpret it. And then you put it together, what hyper exponential could mean. And I do like the idea that it's more hyper exponential, more likely at the early years than it is in the later years. It's just the law of large numbers. Yeah. And so that first graph you showed doesn't make sense. But the second one where, okay, it jumps and then it slows down, that makes more sense. So, and then I think the numbers seem to be kind of in line. I don't know, but it's fun to really examine it further. Thanks.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about, isn't it? I think that we often pick up on certain things Elon says and we miss other things. And so I find it helpful and interesting to go back and sometimes reread what he says on the conference calls several times over, and sometimes with the passage of time.
Yep. Thank you so much, Cern. I appreciate it. Another great show. Follow Cern. He's got a investment advisory firm, wealth management services. Go to BrilliantAdvice.net. Check him out. Thanks, sir.
Thanks, Herbert.
Bye. I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.